I'm your host, Hillary Bricken, and this is the Cannabis Law Now podcast, where we regularly discuss issues related to the cannabis industry, including investment, day-to-day operational issues, and potential reform on the horizon that will impact all cannabis businesses and investors in the United States. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today, we have Mitch Meyers, who was a founder and partner of BeLeaf Medical, a vertically integrated operator with various retail locations in the great state of Missouri. And I am very happy to say Mitch is the first cannabis executive I've had on from the great Midwest. Mitch, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hillary, and yay, Midwest.
I know. Yes, here I sit in California, very jealous of how explosive Missouri has truly become. And before we get into the dynamics of that market, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the cannabis industry?
Well, like most people, I did not grow up in cannabis. In fact, as a kid, I never used it or experimented. I was kind of the just say no to drugs kid. As I got older and realized my drug of choice was alcohol and ended up working in the alcohol beverage industry, I started looking at cannabis in 2009 as the medical program was being brought into Colorado. My son was going to school out there, and when I would be out visiting, I just noticed that all these new businesses were popping up. And it amazed me that it was like the beginning of the internet. When does a new industry just appear in front of your eyes? And so I would knock on doors, and many of the cultivators and dispensary people would allow me in. They gave me tours. It amazed me what a community cannabis people were. And because I had never experienced that in my life in corporate America. So I live in Illinois, and I came back home, and there was a legislative effort coming through, our legislature at the time. And I approached a couple of people, and we decided to make an application there. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no experience in it. I guess we were good term paper writers, but we ended up getting a dispensary license in the Chicago area. So got that up and operational and started studying the patients that were coming through there. And it really just blew my mind as to the help this plant was providing people. And then Missouri, in the state of Missouri in 2015, they offered licenses for 2 people to cultivate, extract, and treat epilepsy patients. So I applied for that and received it, which got me into growing and manufacturing and directly treating patients. We still do that today. It's really our foundation and our beginning in the state of Missouri. But sort of being on the ground, one of the first cannabis growers in Missouri in 80 some years, I began touring people through it so that they could see what the plant was and what it wasn't. And it was really the beginning of the Missouri program. There was an advocacy group that was trying to do a constitutional amendment and get it on the ballot for the public to vote on. So we jumped on that bandwagon. I mean, literally, our conference room was the convening area for people around the state that wanted to participate in that event. And it's truthfully why the state of Missouri has such a great working relationship with one another. We all compete, but we're all good friends and we help each other. We formed MoCAD Trade in that same conference room. So it was a slow start, but man, we've kind of hit the ground running, obviously.
Yeah, indeed. And just in your personal opinion, obviously starting with medical as most states do and kind of pushing forward into adult use, how has the rollout of the adult use market gone to date?
I will tell you, having participated in Illinois and then studying the other states and how their rules and regulations were put together. But the best thing about the Missouri program is that most of the details were nailed down in the Constitution. So it was an up or down vote. Do you want this or not? And once they voted positively to bring it, all of the deadlines and the dates that the Department of Health had to meet were in the Constitution. So we were the fastest state to get stood up for medical. And the same with the adult use, because those details were not left to the legislature to monkey around with. So, people want to know why it was so successful. I truthfully think that's a huge part of it. The other thing is because we knew, those of us that had the licenses and were operating in medical, we knew there was a 6-month turn, and there was date certain when those dispensaries could switch on the adult use activity. So people who were manufacturing and cultivating were able to start stockpiling material so that when it hit, we didn't see the crazy lines and the out of stocks and things like other states have, like Illinois did. I remember when they first went adult use, people stood in line for 4 and 5 hours and still wouldn't be able to get any product when they got there. It was absolute craziness. And we were very much more prepared.
The states that I've worked in, mainly Washington, California, these have had legacy operators in a quasi-regulated medical sphere, for more than 20 years. Do you think, though, that it was maybe an advantage in Missouri or even in Illinois not to have to deal with bringing that marketplace in, getting that marketplace to come to heel?
Sure, I do think that, because I think we had pretty sophisticated business people in Illinois that's got involved in the beginning there. So, they had to study the cannabis cultivation and manufacturing. Obviously, retail was a little bit simpler, but they put on their business hats that work for them in other industries. And I think it was very successful. In Missouri, I always laugh and tell people that you do not have to create demand in Missouri. The demand has always been there. We just need to show up with good products and good pricing and treat our customers fairly. I feel really bad about the California situation. There are some amazing farmers there that, as you said, have been doing it 20 plus years that still can't figure out how to make money at it now that it's gone legal, with all the taxes and rules and regs that change on them all the time. So that is an unfortunate situation. We looked at a lot of states and tried to bring to the Department of Health, when this program kicked off, best practices from states that had done it wrong and then corrected it, states that were doing it well. And the good news is the Department of Health listened, because obviously that this was nothing that they had ever regulated before. And they put in a director at the time, Lyndall Fraker, who very much was a business person and did his level best to, make our customers the North Star of the program, keep the public safe, but make sure that the business owner operators could manage the program effectively.
Got it. Yeah, it is helpful to have a sentient regulator that listens to feedback, executes on industry issues, and kind of doesn't do that cookie cutter, one size fits all coming from another industry. And on the back of that, given the kind of regulatory atmosphere in Missouri and the business climate, has it been tough to be vertically integrated? And, if yes, why? If no, why?
Answer to that is yes and no. Yes, because again, our Constitution stipulated that if you received a license, you had to be operational within 12 months. And we took that seriously. We felt like if we weren't open within 12 months, we could potentially lose our license. Unfortunately, it was at the beginning of COVID. Market was upside down. It was very difficult to get investment dollars, equity dollars in. But the law also said we had to have 51% Missouri ownership. And so it really restricted some of the MSOs and, any of the public companies from coming in at the time of medical. So it was challenging to get the capital, if you didn't already have it arranged, to get going and, build through COVID and get open within 12 months. So we had to make some choices. We had to do some sale leasebacks of some of our real estate so that we could maintain that capital for the build out instead of buying the building or the land or whatever. Now that's a struggle because we want a healthy balance sheet going forward. So, we're having to make some concessions now. But, without being vertically integrated, it's a challenge to have a successful launch. So if we only had cultivation and no retail stores to sell it through, in the beginning, we could start cash flowing as soon as we had flower to sell. But if you had retail and no cultivation or manufacturing, you kind of got put at the end of the line with people who were vertically integrated. And I struggled with that in Illinois because I only had one dispensary. I was the last person, to get product. So, it is a benefit in that you can feed yourself and kind of start building the market. And a first in is a really nice position to be, obviously, when you're trying to build a brand.
Understood. And what has been, and this is a tough question, but I ask it pretty much of anybody that comes on that's an operator. What's been the biggest challenge to date for BeLeaf? And specifically, I think in operating in Missouri and these other states, everyone has a different pain point. Nothing has been universal, which is so fascinating about this multi-state patchwork quilt of regulations and different enforcement issues. What's been your biggest challenge?
By far, affordable capital. The availability of capital and that it's affordable. When we first got started in 18, the cannabis industry looked very different. MSOs were buying businesses with cash. A lot of people were investing in stocks and Canadian stocks, and there was a really enthusiastic, bright future for people investing in cannabis. By the time we were, granted our license and starting to build out, there was really a big change in the market. And today it has continued to just constrict in terms of people investing in cannabis because of the uncertainty. I think there was excitement a year and a half ago about potentially the rescheduling and that we would all have more money to drop to the bottom line to run our business or pay down debt or whatever, and that has since fizzled out. I don't even see people talking about it anymore. So it's really capital. It's access to capital and capital that is affordable.
Understood. Okay. And then the flip side, what's been the biggest win in the past 3-4 years for BeLeaf operating in the Great Midwest?
Well, I don't have just one. I have a list. First of all, I just read yesterday that we have donated $80 million to date to the Veterans Association, which is big money for them. And there's more, where that came from. So that makes us all feel great. Secondly, we've expunged over 150,000 records of people that had low level, drug offenses so that they can get back into the job force and vote and do everything that they should have been doing. And then that we have such a cohesive community in the state working together. I just spent 2 hours this morning on my government affairs call with MoCan Trade, working on issues and opportunities for all of the participants in the state of Missouri. And it's really unique. I mean, when we talk to other people from around the country and just my experience in Illinois, our market is different. And people do want to know, how did you get that? It was just a lot of local Missouri people that wanted to be part of it. And got involved and worked very hard. And we've got some, incredibly heartwarming stories of, people that got involved. We have since had consolidation. There's some out-of-state groups that have come in and started buying up entities, which the good news is some of these independent people were able to take money off the table then. And then, the bigger companies are, able to take advantage of this great marketplace. But, I'm thrilled with the staff that we've built. We just have incredible people that work for us, and it makes me happy to be able to pay them over market wages and have full benefits and 401k. There was a couple of years ago, 1 in 10 jobs created in the state of Missouri were created in the cannabis space. And that gets people's attention, gets the governor and the legislatures paying attention. And the tax dollars were, we did $1.4 million last year in revenue with a state that has 6 million people. We'll do, things are growing. Just last month, our sales were 5% greater than they were a year ago this time. So we feel like we've kind of found, our steady state here now. And obviously price compression is something that we all know is going to continue to come. And we just have to manage our business to be as profitable as we can in this state and knowing that pricing will continue to decline.
Right. I spoke to a receiver that I had on the podcast an episode ago, and he's calling it the Great Shakeout. And he's very busy with all of the failure that's occurring, from west to east. And I don't necessarily think that it's an outlier. I think all industries go through these cycles. Cannabis is lasting longer because of the federal illegality and lack of reform. But you can still be dynamic. You can still scale. You can still be profitable. You really have to be intelligent about it. And I think we've gotten past the point, which frankly is good, that the hype is gone and cannabis doesn't just sell itself. You have to be intelligent, like you said, have a healthy balance sheet and really be strategic, which is ultimately good in the long run. Can you tell me, in your opinion, you kind of hit on it a couple of times, like what is this joie de vivre in Missouri? Why did it explode? Is it because Illinois kind of missed the opportunity? You've got Minnesota, but their program is so restrictive to a degree. What is it that has made it so great?
I will tell you, not a lot of restrictions. Our tax rate is very reasonable. And that's what kicks Illinois in the butt, right? Their taxes are almost 30% on purchase. Ours is 4% for the state and another 3% that can be added in by the city or the county. And, that didn't happen in other states. When we allowed that city or county tax to be added, and we're a few years behind Illinois, so people see the sky doesn't fall. Yes, there is product that helps people here, but we were being courted by cities to bring these cannabis dispensaries, where in Illinois, we were being run out of town on a rail. So, I think that that's part of it. We have limited license, and granted, it's higher than the state of Illinois, but it's fair. There's enough people that can get into business and make money. And as I said, we have a community that works together. And so we don't want to oversupply the market. A lot of us have not built out 100% of our capacity, just trying to determine what is the real need. So we're not going to be like Oklahoma, shipping train cars of cannabis out of state. We're going to grow and sell what we can within the state borders. And it just makes for a really even, fair marketplace.
Mm-hmm. And do you know, just off the top of your head, are you seeing a lot of tourism coming to Missouri to have this experience there? I know in California, there's a ton of it because we have other collateral attractions like Disney, the Salad Bowl, wine country. What are you seeing in Missouri as far as outsiders coming in just to consume or purchase?
So we obviously in the St. Louis area have a lot of out-of-state people that come for Cardinals games and hockey games. And now we have city soccer, which is amazing. And I'll be in my store sometimes and people will come in and they'll be from out of state. So excited, that they can just walk in and buy a couple of pre-rolls. Yes. So we do see that increase when there are events. And like we've got a big NASCAR race coming up just right across the river that will drive everybody's business. On the Kansas City side, we now have stores, and that is a little bit better market every day because they border 3 states that do not have a cannabis law: Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. So you see a lot of out-of-state people just on a weekly basis crossing over and purchasing product. But again, when there's a Chiefs game, it's like all hands on deck. We know we're going to have a good day.
I believe it. Now let's talk about an independently hot topic within the industry, intoxicating hemp. This is also kind of ironically rolling out in a 50-state patchwork quilt of regulation and prohibition. What's the scene like for intoxicating hemp, Delta-9, in Missouri?
It's absolutely terrible.
Oh, all right. Let's dive in.
It's absolutely terrible. I mean, we have worked for the last 3 years to try to pass legislation to get it stamped out. What I just don't understand is in 2015, when I was growing CBD, you would have thought I had a plutonium factory. Like the Department of Ag would come in once a month, test my flower, and if it was more than 0.3% THC, by dry weight, Delta-9 by dry weight, they'd make me throw out the plants, cut them down. I mean, that's how frightened they were of anything that had psychoactivity to it. Now, all of a sudden, with these hempsters here just selling 300 milligram gummies and saying, farm bill legal, what's happened is you've got a lot of these independent convenience stores, liquor stores, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon and you can buy it anywhere. And no one knows where this is coming from. Many of these manufactured products are coming from China. There's no testing, no child protection, no taxes paid. And all of a sudden, people are okay with it. I don't get it. These are drug dealers, and they're just turning their back and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to send a few kids to the emergency room, but, you know, other people now can participate in the marketplace. So now it's about the business, right? We don't want to tell our convenience store owners that they can't sell this stuff because they're making a lot of money on it. You know, who cares who gets hurt? Well, we care because the cannabis industry has worked for 20 plus years to try to make it secure and safe and tested and all the kind of rules that we live within. So we're hopping mad about it, and we're doing what we can to try to get these places shut down. I mean, I have stores that open right across from my dispensaries selling 28 and 32% THC flower.
Understood. It is a big issue. And you're seeing states one by one kind of analyze it, opt out, opt in. In California, there's a ban. Texas just banned it. But then you've got a Minnesota that allows it and regulates it, at least in beverage and food form. I don't know.
But here's what I will say. We were willing to do a low dose beverage carve out in Missouri to just try to get to a bill that everybody would approve.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think that beverages are a great way to consume cannabis. And if you can put some guardrails on these producers, like Anheuser-Busch is interested in doing this, I trust that they're going to make a quality product, and they care that there's, you know, quality ingredients and tested and child protected and all that. You can't guarantee that with a lot of these out of state, out of country products. But if we were to allow a 5 milligram beverage to be sold outside of cannabis dispensaries, that would introduce a whole new audience to cannabis and make them understand it better, which I think would just help the industry overall. So beverages I get because they are expensive to produce. They're hard to distribute. Cannabis dispensaries aren't big enough. We don't have big coolers and things like that, the way people like to buy it. So in my opinion, I could justify that. And, you know, you can't sit and drink necessarily a 6-pack of something, whereas you totally could sit and eat a whole package of gummies and consume 300 milligrams.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, which is maybe the striking of the balance is via a product segment, and that could be beverage because it is so dialed and calculated and tough to make and expensive. So you're going to have only good actors participating. I think that's very interesting. I think nobody knows how it's going to play out at the federal level while these two industries hang in the balance.
Well, and we know these beverage guys are struggling. I mean, alcohol sales are declining like crazy. So they have huge lobbies. They got way more money than we do to put pressure on politicians. And, you know, it's working. But again, if we could restrict it to them, you know, we know who they are. We know where they make this stuff. Again, it's not like some third world group sending in dangerous product. It blows my mind that somebody will go into one of these little trap houses and buy, you know, unknown, unmarked, untested flour in a baggie and not walk out of there and be concerned that what else could be in that.
Mm-hmm. The consumer psychology is kind of all over the map, and the consumer protection issues around it are really untapped. And I feel like that will also help move the ball forward because courts might end up deciding what's going to be allowed versus essentially legislative arms. But grabbing your crystal ball, since we're kind of, you know, talking about the Farm Bill and will or they won't close the loophole, what are these states going to do? What does the future hold for BeLeaf in the next 2 to 5 years? Are you going to try to become an MSO, go state to state, license your IP, going to keep it to Missouri? Are you looking forward to rescheduling? Are you holding your breath? You know, that's probably my final question for you. What does the future hold for you in Missouri?
So we have spent 5 years really just building a good company and being profitable and, you know, having audited financial statements, continuing to grow our top line revenue and our EBITDA, trying to staff the business with the right people on the bus, right? We made mistakes in the beginning, like a lot of people did. And you try some people on and they don't necessarily work. And sometimes you hire great people and who was good in the beginning to get you going may not be the right people to grow the business into the future. So we, as a partnership group, have really focused on that. And we could not be prouder of, where we are. We've been able to acquire some more retail locations as we can produce more product and sell it through our own stores. Obviously, that's a higher profit margin, which we always have our eyes focused on. Again, we want to make sure we've got a strong balance sheet. And we have been asked to take our brand to a couple of different states. And we know enough about bad rules to steer clear. Like we had an opportunity in New York. And it's like, I just can't figure out who's making money there yet, except the black market. So we have not jumped at every bright, shiny object that's been put in front of us. And I'm so happy we haven't. The opportunity now is to maybe look at other companies or brands and partner with them and take small steps into another like-minded state, if you will. But at the end of the day, if 2 to 3 years from now, rescheduling happens, I think if they just reschedule us to Schedule 3, the net of that's going to be, we're not going to pay as much taxes, but that will probably inure to the customer. You'll probably see prices continue to come down for them. So that'll be good for them. If the federal government just basically says, we're out of it and you can do whatever you want and you can ship across state lines, that's a different kettle of fish. I think we'd have to figure out, at what point can people do cross-state shipping, and then where do we go from there? But you never start a company to sell it, right? You start a company to build it and be profitable and pay your investors back. And that's the path we're on. And hopefully in 2 to 3 years, if there is some big fish out there, Anheuser-Busch, that wants a quality organization, we'll be sitting here looking pretty.
I love it. I love it. An exit. No one ever frowned at a good exit either. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mitch Meyers, founder and partner of BeLeaf Medical, vertically integrated in Missouri. You keep rocking out during the great cannabis shakeout. I'm so happy for you. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Hillary. This was fun.
And that concludes today's episode of the Cannabis Law Now podcast. Until next time, stay alert, stay alive.